This is What the Hack 15's check-in number 5, where we will continue to outline the progress we've made this week. This week, we focused on addressing the previous challenges encountered with accurately measuring the compression depth. We also brainstormed on components and functionality of the application's user interface.
In the previous week, we discussed the challenges of accurately tracking compression depth. Some of the factors that increase the complexity of this calculation include the practical limitations of ensuring the compressions you are tracking are actually of the desired depth, finding the correct landmarks on the sensor compression data to perform appropriate data segmentation and feature extraction, and double integration estimation issues such as rounding of the area under the curve and imprecision due to sensor noise or calibration issues.
Our previous depth calculation results were highly inconsistent. The double integration method was performed on data from TRO to TRO. The rationale for this method was to include as much sensor data as possible. This way, we would have to do less manipulation of the results since the results would include a larger portion of the compression. In addition, we hope that with more data samples, this would reduce the impact of rounding errors introduced by the trapezoidal roll or filtering effects. However, this included more confounding factors than initially anticipated.
By utilizing data gathered from trough to trough, this included acceleration data that was also under 9.82 meters per second squared. This meant that the force of gravity and the force of compression were in opposition to one another, acting as a confounding factor when attempting to measure velocity and distance. In order to overcome this issue, the start and stop points for feature extraction were actually reduced and tightened to a baseline of 10 meters per second squared. Furthermore, the effect of gravity was subtracted from each velocity and distance calculation. By doing this, we could reduce the effect gravity was having on our compression data and still be able to extrapolate the distance traveled through each compression.
Here, we will show examples of the differences in results between the old and updated compression methods. At the top graph, we can see that the average calculated depth of a 1-inch compression was 1.95 inches, almost double the expected amount. At the bottom graph, we can see that the average calculated depth was 2.214 inches for an expected 2-inch compression. These results indicate that the methodology chosen would not be able to track between adequate and inadequate chest compressions.
After modification of the compression depth method, it can be seen that the average compression depth of 30 1-inch compressions was 1.06 inches, while the average compression depth of 2-inch compressions was 1.99 inches. These results are more consistent with expected outcomes and were also consistent across higher and lower frequencies of compressions.
This week, we brainstormed on the functionality and components of the application's user interface. The team first performed individual brainstorming, where we each highlighted features and functionality ideas for the user interface. Ideas were compared and contrasted as part of a group brainstorming activity. From these ideas, a final candidate user interface was selected for medium fidelity prototyping.
Example features and functionality ideas generated from the UI brainstorming activities include providing a built-in tutorial and instructional guide outlining proper CPR and application usage, an analysis and feedback screen that provides guidance to the user on their use of the application and how they can improve administering CPR, an optional metronome feature to time CPR compressions for training purposes, gamification of the compression process, and incorporation of vibrations and sounds for feedback. Finally, a general layout and flow of the application was created. Next week, we will focus on finalizing the UI design and beginning the first draft of the application UI.